Fist bump, welcome back. So we are continuing the series winning the World Cup, and I did it in the wrong order, but my name is Faris, aka the Football Accountant. So we have looked at Argentina, France, and Germany already, and today we are continuing looking at not too in-depth tactical stuff, I wouldn't say, but again, just the overall trends of what makes a good World Cup team. I was talking to my dad about the World Cup, and now it's called the World Cup Finals, which both of us think is ridiculous. I don't know if there's anyone else, but I asked him, has it always been called the World Cup Finals just to make, the top 32, 48, how many teams there are? Has it always been called the World Cup Finals? And he said, no, it's somewhat of like a new trend to call it that. And I think for me, that means you then have the World Cup Finals final, right? Which just sounds really ridiculous. And I hear all these records of like this person has scored the most goals at World Cup finals or in a World Cup final, and they're very different. And the other thing, so obviously we think it's utter work nonsense. And then the other thing, when we were watching the championship and watching the playoffs this past season, again, didn't realize it before, not sure if it's a new thing, but the team that wins promotion during the playoffs gets a trophy, right? And both of these things, calling it the World Cup Finals, like being able to say as a player, obviously it's still impressive, but as a player saying, I played in a World Cup Finals when you didn't play in the final, right? Or winning a trophy when you might have finished sixth in the championship, but you got promoted. Both of those just feel like participation trophies to me, which in kids is fine and I think good, even though some people disagree on that. But for adults, you don't need participation trophies. Like if someone gave me a participation trophy, I would throw it in the bin. I don't want it. I'm not at that age anymore. So yeah, now we'll get into the video. Lessons from Spain 2010. So again, this is the few sort of core points that I remember from these teams before I go back or have gone back and watched a few games and looked at all of the lineups and minutes and all of that kind of stuff. So the first one is tactically, which I think most of us probably think of when we think of Spanish football, which is pass, pass, and pass again, right? This team was at the height of tiki-taka, at the height of Barcelona's powers under Pep Guardiola, and the spine of their team reflects that, which we'll get to. All four of their knockout games were goalless after an hour, okay? Which is interesting because then we come on to the next point, which is their subs, who were, I would say, in very stark contrast to their starters, right? Their starters, like I've just said, pass, 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 very reserved, keep ball without necessarily too much direct attacking threat, not too much dribbling, not too much running in behind the defense or even shooting or crossing, just those basic things. Their first thought really was pass and move, like a rondo just played on an 11-a-side pitch, whereas their subs were not 100% the opposite of that, but they were very, very different, and I would say a lot more direct, okay, which we will come to. Now we come to their minutes distribution. Again, yellow column, right, shows how it's sorted, most minutes to least or no minutes down there. So we have 8 players who have played 630 or more out of 660 minutes. They only went to extra time once, okay? Then even their next two guys, right, 556, still very high, 6.2 out of 7.3 full 90s. And again, the two main numbers that I want you to remember, the 11th guy, 3.2, very, very similar ballpark. And the 14th guy, or essentially the last sub off the bench when you're allowed 3 subs, 1.4, very similar ballpark. Okay, so hopefully you can see, or you're sort of looking at these numbers as I talk, that again, rotation is not as important as people think. And another way to demonstrate that is the first 11. This was actually the most settled side. So the first 11 played 91.1% of the minutes, and the next 3 played 6.7% of the minutes, right? I should have rounded that to a different number, equaling 97.8% of the minutes by their top 14 players, okay? So very, very high, very settled. And again, I spoke about it in the last video of outliers, okay? You're thinking, why is the first 11 or first 11 plus the next 3, why is that number not way higher, but a good amount higher than the past few teams that we've looked at? Now, this team in 2010 had come off the back of winning the Euros in 2008, and a lot of these players were either starters in that team or they were in the squad already, and they really didn't have too much changeover. Like, off the top of my head, I believe it was Busquets. Again, he's 21, so he was too young. And Fabregas and maybe Pedro either weren't in the squad or didn't really play heavy minutes. Like, I know Busquets replaced Senna, I want to say. The other two, I mean, they're on the bench, but I can't remember who they replaced. It's a long time ago. But again, don't rotate for the sake of rotation. Play your starters, play heavy minutes. If you're sure of your team, keep your team, right? Now we come to the minutes distribution with my terribly drawn bell curve, right? But all I'm trying to say is, or illustrate is, you'd expect low minutes from these guys, 18 to 22, and then you'd expect more and more minutes as players get into their peak ages, and then less and less as players get older. Now, there's a few outliers, right? Like the main one here, Busquets, right? But again, outliers are explainable. It makes sense, okay? It's not saying he shouldn't play that many minutes. It's just saying, wow, that's really good. He's playing that many minutes. And same for the guys here that don't quite fall under the trend line. Now we come to their results, right? Like I said, a few interesting things from this. The first, all 4 of their knockouts were goalless at 60 minutes and all ended 1-0. But the most important or interesting game for me is they lost their first game. Now, if you look at that Argentina team and how much they rotated after losing the first game, you might expect something similar here, but they don't, and we'll get to why. So, broad numbers, 8 goals conceded, 8 goals scored, 2 goals conceded, 5 clean sheets, right? Goals conceded, very similar. 5 clean sheets, very similar, right? 8 goals scored is a little bit low, you might think, okay? But when you're winning 4 games, 1-0, that's all you need. Gives them a goal difference of +6. Again, very, very similar ballpark to the first 2 teams that we looked at, France and Argentina. Means you're winning every game like 0.85 to 0. Okay, which is essentially what they did because their defense was so good. And the only game they needed extra time in was the final. Now we come to their first game, again, a loss against Switzerland, but Del Bosque keeps 10 of the same starters and only switches out Silva in between this game all the way to the final. So he was very sure of his team going in. And based on the Argentina result, again, a loss, and then making loads of changes, we might expect the same here. However, the difference is Del Bosque was very, very sure of this team, even though they had lost the first game. The main lesson is he didn't rotate for the sake of rotation. Now, Scaloni was a little bit less sure, or a lot less sure, making 5 changes. He was like, well, our backs are against the wall, which, again, Spain's were here as well, but you don't rotate for the sake of rotation. If you're sure that this is your starting 11, that this is your strongest 11, as much as possible, you keep it, right, to the same core, and you play those guys. Again, heavy minutes is the point that I'm going to keep getting at. So he does make 2 changes, and Torres actually was up top, Villa was on the wing, Navas right wing, and then standard 3 in midfield. Final group game, right, he brings in Iniesta for Navas. Again, a bit of a more reserved player, I would say, right? A midfielder, a number 10 for a winger. Then we come to the first knockout, no changes. So this is the team that started the first game. They made 1 change, David Silva for Pedro, by the final. They also lost, so their backs are against the wall, which, when we come to the second game, when we think of Argentina, who made 5 changes, now we see 2, we might be thinking, oh, why has one manager made 5 and one only made 2, right? The point, I guess, that I was trying to make with the Argentina team, or again, using this team, is if you are sure of your team, you don't rotate. That's the main point. Okay, now think of it like this from a coaching perspective. If your best player, like they've lost, if your best player has a bad game, just one bad game, you're not all of a sudden going to bench them in the next game, right? You're going to give them a chance and say, okay, I might bring this player in next to you, or this player in to play fullback behind you, or next to you at centre back, whatever it is. You are still going to trust them to go out there and get the result. Whereas Scaloni was a little bit less sure of his team, and he saw bad performances from players that he wasn't sure of, right? Even Messi didn't have a best first game, but you're not just going to bench Messi. You know you need him, right? But the players that maybe didn't play so well, or maybe it's not even they didn't play well, but you expect these other players to give you better balance with who you want to stay as your core, which we know this team was very, very settled in the core. So I'm talking goalkeeper, back four, and the three midfielders was very, very settled. You make changes based around them to make them look good. You don't just say, all right, Busquets, Alonso, whoever it is, you had a bad game, I'm going to bench you, right? So they win that game, making fairly minimal changes. Then final group game, he brings in Iniesta. Again, one change. Now we come to the knockouts, right? He's getting more and more sure of his team. Again, the trend is there. No changes, right? Quarterfinals, no changes. Semifinals, he makes that one change, right? Pedro comes in, David Villa shifts to number 9. Again, he, in a couple of the previous slides, he was sort of pictured playing as a number 9, but he was actually playing left wing. All of his minutes at number 9, he didn't get a single goal, right? Which again, the trend now should hopefully be painfully obvious, I would say, that your number 9 does not need to get you as many goals as people might think, or as many goals as your number 9 does to win you a Premier League, for example. Then we come to the final. Again, his team has narrowed and narrowed, and he makes no changes. Again, I'm filming this one back to back with the Germany video, so it feels weird. I'm sure I probably don't have to say it, but follow the link and you can join my predictions league. Even if it's after the first game, you can still join, right? If you need help doing it, this is how you do it on phone, right? You come up there to the menu, predictor, then you go to leagues, scroll down to join a league, or again, thanks to my sister, the link is in the bio. And again, because I'm filming it the same, not just because I'm lazy, but I'm keeping the same word, right? I have to say sorry that I didn't get all of the videos out before the World Cup started, but it's not because I'm not managing my time correctly. It's probably because I bit off something too big to chew, but that's okay. That's on me. So remember to be ready, safe, and kind. All right. Cheers.